Manfred, before we talk about Tuscany,
Yes.
let's start first with South Africa.
Okay.
But some people might not know that you do also have a connection to Italy because your mom is Italian.
Yes, correct. 100%.
So talk a little bit about growing up in South Africa, and at what point did you actually think or fall in love with wine or decide that you wanted wine to become your career?
Wow. Okay. So my mother is Sardinian. She was born in South Africa. My grandparents immigrated after the war via Brazil, and my mother grew up in South Africa. So I grew up in KwaZulu Natal, so the Kingdom of the Zulu, up in KZN, and not a lot of grapes growing up there. It's the Natal Midlands, so like the UK, the Midlands, a lot of farmland and mountains and sugarcane, and we have the sea and all the rest. So not a lot of vineyards there, but growing up in a half Italian family, so to speak, food and wine was very important in the household. It was cooking. I cook every day now, but cooking for us was a family gathering in the evening, and then wine was involved. And my father, when he was in the army in South Africa, worked with one of the top South African winemaker. He was in the army with one of the top South African winemakers at the time, and introduced wine to my father, and like high quality wine, not just like box wine or drinking wine, so to speak. And this family is the winemaker is called Jock Borman. He kept in contact with our family over the years. And I guess I've kind of always taken the road less traveled my entire life, so I decided I wanted to go down to Stellenbosch University. Wasn't so sure what I was going to study, excuse me, but my father kind of said, like, why don't you try winemaking? Like, the science, I was very good at science when I was at school. I like to do stuff outdoors, I like being indoors, but I like to do stuff with my hands. My parents are both artists, but I draw stick drawings. I couldn't, but my art is my palate and my taste and cooking, and then we thought, why not wine? So winemaking for me was kind of just like out of curiosity, and something that I started to study, and once I started to do it, I realized that there's nothing else on earth I want to do. Like, that was for me. It came to me quite well, and I enjoyed it. And my lecture attendance was maybe not that great, but I did quite well at university because I just wanted to learn and know more. And then from there, I set off working around the world. So I was working as a young intern. I wasn't a flying winemaker, as people say. I was like a flying cellar rat. I was basically working vintages in the southern hemisphere and in the northern hemisphere. And I went to New Zealand and then Napa Valley, and working for producers along the way who introduced me to other producers. And I worked in South Africa, and then up to Piemonte was my first Italian harvest, and loved it very much, and ended up going to New Zealand, and then realized New Zealand is far too far away to live from the rest of the world. It's taken me 2 days to get home, so I ended up going back up to Italy, and something has always drawn me to Italy, and I think like it's, I don't know how you say, like going full circle, like the family, there's something that just always pulled me towards it. And went to work for my second vintage in Piemonte at Vieti, and post-vintage we drove down through Tuscany and stopped off at Querciabella, and we spent 2 days at the winery, tasting and meeting the team, and long story short, we were driving back up to Vieti, and the former CEO of Querciabella, who'd been in contact with the family, turned around and said, how can we get that guy to join the team? And as a young 25-year-old winemaker back then, it was an amazing opportunity, and to go back to the Italian roots and to sink roots, it's quite special. So.
Sure. Let's go back to New Zealand for a second. What are the things in New Zealand that really resonated with you in terms of wine production, wine growing, the viticulture down there?
So the New Zealand, for me, there's amazing opportunity for winemakers in New Zealand, because there you can grow anything, you can do anything you want to. There's no restrictions. There's no certified governing body that says thou shalt plant this and thou shalt make this and bottle it for this long. So it's very open. There is a very high quality of winemaking. It was at a time in my life when I was very much, it was more about the science of the winemaking, and now science and art have kind of, as I've progressed as a winemaker, have come together and art takes over, but science is always there. So it was at a time where it really appealed to me, the science of making, and there was many different things going on. We weren't just making one grape, which was red, and so the opportunities there were great, and the culture is also amazing. So Kiwis are the same as South Africans, so I was playing cricket in the summer and rugby in the winter, and there was skiing. I was living in Queenstown, so it's like never land. Some people go there and they wake up 15 years later, so it was a great place and a good time as a young person to enjoy life. And I met a Scottish lady in New Zealand, who's now the wife and the mother of our 2 children. So it was a lot happened in a very short time for me in New Zealand, but it was a great time. Loved it.
Was there ever a thought that you wanted to make wine in South Africa and base yourself in South Africa?
Yes, that's always at the back of my head. Like South Africa for me was like the backup in life. Like, I know it well. My family still live there. My closest best friends are living there. So South Africa for me, if things didn't work out somewhere, I knew that I could just fall back on South Africa. And the quality of wine in South Africa right now is pushing the limits. And I think the new generation is driving quality, and finally people are getting recognition across the board, not just the famous producers. So that's very exciting for me, something that I'm in regular contact with. I buy a lot of South African wine, I drink a lot of South African, I collect South African wine, so I keep an eye on South Africa. It's always there, but right now, it's my life, it just doesn't feel right. So where I'm living now, it just feels like we're supposed to be there, and I don't know if it's forever, I can't tell you that, but for now it just feels right.
It must be exciting to see, though, how the South African industry has evolved over the last couple of decades.
I love it. Yeah, it's amazing. There are producers that didn't exist when I was in Stellenbosch University in 2005 who are making wines that are like getting an iconic status around the world in a very short time. Like, that takes decades or centuries in Europe, whereas there's producers that are pushing the limits and they're driving quality. Again, it's very open. You can do what you want, however you want to do it. So that allows for like the artists to come out, and I think it's very exciting for South Africa. So it's something that I'm proud of.
So at Vieri, of course, you got the opportunity to work with Luca Curado.
Yes.
What were some of the things that you took away from Luca, because you continue to work with Luca?
Yes. So Luca taught me something that's very important. That, like, making wine must be fun, and that's like, no matter the stress of the harvest, no matter how busy you are, we are waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to drive to go and pick. I have a scar, and I nearly cut my thumb off picking the Barbera and the Asti vineyards. But you go back to the winery. You have a beer or two, you relax, the fruit arrives, you crush grapes, you clean everything until midnight, and you wake up the following day and you do it. And there's a great appreciation for that, and the team building for me. Team's something very important with me. And Luca, I think that's something that if you've met Luca, you'll know he's a dear friend of mine also, but something that he showed that it is fun. Like, winemaking is fun, and even now Luca, we get to taste about once a month together, maybe sometimes once every 2 months regularly. But for me, he helps me to understand the finer differences in very small, like in the single vineyard approach that they have in Piemonte, that we are trying to now apply, and I think we're applying quite successfully at Querciabella, having vineyards in 3 different villages. It's all stuff that was Luca was quite important in helping me to learn that and have an appreciation for it, and to seek out the best of each vineyard site.
I just had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with Luca and Elena a few weeks ago. Talk a little bit about their new project and taste some of the wines. And one of the things I said to them is the sheer joy that I see coming from them right now, which is fantastic, because for people who've been in the industry for that period of time, to still have that feeling, I think all of us strive for that.
Yeah. I've known Luca since the before and during and after this VAT, and he's like Luca 2.0 now. But also, like, many people say, like, why you want to go back to be a farmer and to go and look at it, he just loves it. It's the love of the game, and I think that's it's enchanting. It's something that rubs off on you. So that's why, like, I dedicated my life to the wines of Querciabella, because it's full love of the passion of making the wine. It doesn't have to go and start off from scratch, but it's very exciting, and doing it with his family and with his children, it's exciting. I tasted the wines now in Italy 2 weeks ago, and I love the label and everything, so it's very exciting.
Absolutely. So at Querciabella, now, Chianti Classico, first, I mean, also the property in the Maremma, but let's talk about Chianti Classico a little bit. Was there, or what was the transition for you going from working with Nebbiolo to Sangiovese?
For me, like, it was relatively simple, because I'd been working with Pinot before Nebbiolo, so medium style, medium body wines, very expressive of the terroir. Like, Sangiovese for me is like a chameleon of the terroir. It expresses it, and the following the years of working and experience around the world, applying those different practices to get the best out of the vineyard site, it wasn't such a big change really. I mean, I'd been used to it. It was more about getting a better understanding and trying to learn how each site expresses itself, because we take it to the next level at Querciabella. There's like 60 parcels of Sangiovese that goes into there. So breaking everything down was the biggest challenge for me, and then also we changed the way we did things. Before the 2010 vintage, we had larger tanks. We 2010 we invested in smaller micro fermentation, small 3 ton. We broke everything down. So getting the team involved when I couldn't speak a word of Italian. I grew up with Italian mother. I could say Merry Christmas and Happy Birthday, and I could count to 10. So I thought I could speak Italian, but I couldn't speak Italian. So I mean, getting with the team in the winery, I know it was incredibly challenging for them. I know they probably didn't enjoy the 2010 vintage as much as I did, but we've been building from then onwards, and I promise you I have the most amazing team ever. You have no idea the dedication to do all of that, to break everything down, to doing whole bunch fermentation, submerged caps, etc. This is going into, no, that's going into what did it. They are all driven for quality. Marco, Nicola, Michelangelo, Michele, everyone. We're blessed to have a great team.
Talk a little bit about the philosophy of viticulture and how it relates to really expressing the various individual vineyard sites.
Okay, so Querciabella, we are certified organic since 2000, and also practicing 100% plant-based since 2010. And let's just say, I think when you are an organic producer, you have to be very on top of things. You've got to be preventative as opposed to curative in your winemaking. So it forces you to pay a lot of attention in the vineyards, make sure that things are on track, and getting the ripening done and all the rest. We're very, very particular and very precise. Mother Nature is making it very challenging for us. Mm-hmm. So it forces you to really pay attention in the vineyards, and then following the practice through into the winery, breaking everything down. It's quite challenging, but I think the proof is in the pudding for us, I guess. So it's all of the practices and the philosophy in the winery. It's very much qualitative driven. I mean, we're respecting nature. It's the most important thing is the soil health, the soil nutrition, the animal welfare. And Querciabella, we have 49 hectares in the Chianti Classico. We have 200 hectares of forest. Mm-hmm. Querciabella, Quercia being oak, Bella being Bella, named after the beautiful oak forest that's around the estate. So we're living in symbiosis with the animals is a bit challenging, because we do have quite a few wild boar and deer that are coming and eating our grapes. Luckily we have wolves now that are, until they bite one of my children, but it's lucky that they're keeping the deer seem to be not as prominent. The wild boar is still quite a big problem for us in the Chianti Classico region. A big problem. Eat a lot of grapes.
Sure. With Chianti Classico, before we talk a little bit about the subzones of Chianti Classico, because you have vineyards in a few of the different subzones. Talk a little bit about coming from outside the area to a very historic area. how do you maintain that tradition? Or did you ever feel as an outsider coming in, and how do you maintain the tradition of Chianti Classico, but still allow it and help it to continue to progress?
Wow, so I think I'm so extremely outside that it was almost people didn't. If I come from the Tuscan coastline, it would have been more like, who is this? What is this? Or if I'd come from Siena, they would be like, what are you doing here? So from the fact that I was so outside of everything, I think kind of people were just they looked and weren't so sure. But for me, the first thing was learning the language. I wanted to know Italian because I needed to communicate, to understand, to grow as my role in the company. But with my team, team for me is very important. And then immersing myself in the village. Now we live up in Lamole, one of the ancient borgos in the Chianti Classico. But immersing myself in life in Italy was very important. I didn't want to be the expat who's there and speaks English after 20 years and still can't order a coffee. So for me that was very important, and respecting the tradition, like as part of my life in South Africa, growing up as an Italian chap, like tradition is very, very important for me. So from a winemaking point of view, I mean, Querciabella, we have always had the style of the elegant style of the Querciabella is something that it's a progression and something that we continue to do within the Chianti Classico region. But I think being very open-minded as a person and having worked all around the world with many different situations and different styles of wine and different expression of fruit, applying that at Querciabella, I think it's working out quite well for us, because it's the challenges of the season makes you have to think out the box, but you can't just do what your nonno taught you to do, or your nonno's nonno taught you to do, because it's not going to work out well for you, I can promise you.
Right. And I think as a region, Chianti Classico I think has done a pretty good job over the last several years in particular, in terms of sharing its story, in terms of the fact that so many producers are producing organically, sustainably, and to stay relevant with today's consumer and industry, restaurateurs, shops. I think that's a very unique thing for a region that has that kind of history.
Absolutely, and we're quite a big region, quite many producers. Here, credit has to go to the Consorzio of the Chianti Classico, because they are doing a phenomenal job. Like I jokingly say, like winemakers, we have my winery, they would have a tight chain on me and keep me in the winery, but we're over here now, I'm over here this week, because the Consorzio organized an amazing event on Monday for the 100 years of the Consorzio of the Chianti Classico region. So they're doing a phenomenal job. They have Chianti Classico ambassadors, as you're aware of. They bring sommeliers to us, and we go out and we speak a lot. There's many events around the world, and staying relevant is hard. There's a lot of great wine out there. There's, as we spoke about, from not only from South Africa, from all over the world. People are making wine in Sweden. So there's a lot of wine everywhere. So staying relevant is quite a challenge for everyone, and I think the driving force in the Chianti Classico region, and something I've noticed in the 14 years I'm now in Italy, is the quality is improving across the board. Not only at the tip of the pyramid, not only the Gran Seleziones, which are also getting better, or the Reservas, but the Chianti Classicos right across the board. You will struggle to find a faulted Chianti Classico these days. 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. There was so everyone is. I love competition because it forces. It's iron sharpening iron. Like we're all forcing the quality up, and as a region and going out around the world and something, we're proud. I'm proud to work in the Chianti Classico region.
Right. And I think one of the really interesting things that's happened in recent years is the development of the Ugas. And again, to help people understand not just Chianti Classico, but the fact that there's so much diversity within Chianti Classico. So talk a little bit about, because the winery itself is in Greve,
yes,
but you also have vineyards in other areas. You have in Rada.
In Rada,
Gaiole.
previously in Gaiole, up until 2001 in Gaiole,
Okay.
and also up in Lamole,
Lamole,
since
which is
2000.
exciting.
Very, very exciting.
Yeah.
It's a little piece of heaven up there.
Absolutely. So, talk a little bit about the specifics of each of those areas, and what is it that you look to from those areas to be translated to the wine?
Okay. So for the fact that we now have these UGAs, which is voted on and decided from 2020, we'll take a step back and say, Querciabella, since 2010, we have been bottling single village Sangiovese from the different villages where we have our own estate grapes. So following this evolution in the Chianti Classico has been something amazing for us. Right now in tank, we will be bottling the 2021 vintages of the Gran Selezione, which we will have on the label, Greve, Rada and Lamole, which is like, it's the dream come true for us. It's what we've been working on. So for us, for me personally, so it's going to sound a bit strange, but so I can tell in colors. Like, so I smell and taste in colors my whole life, and the Greve, for me, the Greve fruit, when I close my eyes or if I smell, you can put a blind tasting of our wines at Querciabella. I'm not talking about Greve for everyone, but at Querciabella, our Greve is red. It's red, and then it's everything that you associate with red, the red cherries, the crunchy fruits. It just speaks red to me. There's energy in the wines, there's vibrancy, but it's just everything is about red and strawberries and cherries. Is the Rada, for me, things they get like a little bit darker. It's almost going towards purple. There's the licorice, but sometimes I smell Rada and I smell orange, which I think is the skin of the orange, the bout de orange, or even like iron or rust, something for me, and that's very typical. But for us, the difference between Greve and Rada, in the mid palate, the texture, there's a different mid palate on our Rada wines. We have 13 hectares in Rada. We break it down into I don't know how many different ferments, but all of the Rada wines, they have something in the mid palate which is adding another layer of complexity for the Chianti Classico. The Lamole fruit is just, it goes violet and lift and jumps out like it's like the iris, the iris that we have in Lamole that surrounds all of the Borgos. It's just energy, and there's a finesse, there's a silkiness to it, much lighter in color, but there's the aromatic lift is something gorgeous, and energy on the palate is coming from the Lamole, which in our 2020 Chianti Classico is the first year where we have the wine of Lamole, and I think from a concentrated warm vintage, it's driving energy and drinkability. Yeah.
Do you attribute that a lot to the altitude?
The altitude, definitely. The altitude, the clones up in Lamole. So I mean, Lamole, we have vineyards from 635 meters is the highest point, and then one of the vineyards as you drive up is Casole. So before you arrive in Lamole, underneath the church, we have this beautiful amphitheater vineyard, and that's around 525 meters above sea level. So the altitude, it's much higher. The difference there also is the mountain gets quite steep on the side. So our vineyards in Lamole, they don't get the morning sun straight away. They have the afternoon sun full on. And then also the clones. There we have the big clones of the Lamole, the biotype, the Lamole biotype clones, the ones that are beautiful for Instagram photos because they're really quite big and gorgeous. But they're making wines that are very juicy, very very elegant, very fresh, very perfumed. And I think it's a combination of factors. We can pick the Lamole fruits 5 weeks after we pick the Greve fruit, which is 2 kilometers as the crow flies north. So it's that we can be picking it. We're always picking Lamole in the middle to end of October. And I believe from the locals, because I actually am. So I'm very biased. I bought a house up in Lamole. My children, they speak a Lamolese. They tell stories about how they used to be picking in November back in the day. They used to be picking up in Lamole with these big, beautiful grapes. So it's a part of. It's probably where the last fruit in the Chianti Classico is being picked because of those reasons.
Right. Talk a little bit about going back to Greve and Rara. The differences you attribute to the difference between Galestro and Albarese.
Bravo. Galestro, we have a lot of, in Ruffoli, our higher altitude, we have a lot of the macino of the Chianti, the big sandstone. You know, the big rocks that people build their villas and the structures are built with? We have a lot of that. As we come lower down the hill, we have a belt of galestro at about the winery's altitude, 425 meters. And then as we go down, there's a lot more clay in the soil, a lot more density of fruit also. The gaiole, the Rada fruit, it's on a south-facing part of looking towards Rada. So like, for point of reference, where Volpaia is on that belt, Volpaia across to Montevecchino, the Vecchino area. So looking from there is all galestro soil, just pure galestro, like rocks. It's hard to grow the cover crops. That's how rocky the soils are. It's very rugged soils, and I think the combination of the factors is probably the altitude there is around 400 to 450 meters, so it's not as high as Ruffali, but we're always picking Rada we start picking Rada about 2 weeks after we start picking the Sangiovese and Greve, and then we come back and we'll pick the Cabernet and Greve, and then finish picking the Sangiovese and Rada normally.
Okay. Since you've been at Querciabella, how has the climate change affected not just what's happening in the vineyard, but how you deal with what's happening in the vineyard?
It's the biggest challenge for us right now. It's not only for me, for my friends in South Africa, in Australia, Napa, in Canada, all over the world. No two seasons are the same, so it's very inconsistent, and we don't like inconsistency when you're trying to make a wine or following a style of or the Sangiovese. It becomes challenging. So the inconsistencies is the challenge. You've got to stay ahead of the curve. Your canopy management needs to be on point. We have no irrigation in the Chianti Classico, so we need to rely on Mother Nature opening the tap so we can have enough water for the vines, and sometimes she opens the tap more than others, and sometimes she don't open it for 3 months. So you need to have your wits about you, how to work the soils, when to open up the canopy, take the leaves off, manually remove the leaves on the morning side, on the afternoon side. We don't want sunburn, so all of these characteristics are very hard. The pruning, we're pruning as late as possible because spring frost is becoming a thing. Yeah. In the lower part of our vineyards at 350 meters, we had spring frosts in 2017, 18, 20 and 21. We haven't had spring frost since the 90s in the Chianti Classico region. It got down to 3.8 degrees Celsius last week, the 20th of April. So this has not happened. It doesn't normally happen like this. It always gets cold in the first week of April, but normally the vines were probably sleeping back in the day because it was colder in the winter. Right. So these are all things that you have to stay ahead of, and from a winemaking point of view, even for our batar, keeping finesse and elegance, keeping tension, purity of fruit without it getting too large is you strive for. So it's you can't do what your nonos taught you to do. I don't think so.
Sorry. Are you finding that the style of viticulture helps the vines to regulate themselves?
I think Sangiovese is a very tough little... There's a reason why Sangiovese has been grown there for hundreds of years or 1,000 years or whatever. But it's the Sangiovese kind of... It weathers the storm, so to speak, better. The extremities of the season far greater than, for example, Merlot or even the Cabernet. But yeah, it's not easy. We like a challenge.
Do you treat Sangiovese differently, or I should say, do you treat Cabernet and Merlot differently than you treat Sangiovese?
We respect every grape for what it is, how it is, and trying to bring out the expression of that grape regardless. So from treating it differently, we're at a point where we are very gentle during fermentation right across the board, especially with wines like the Merlot or with the Cabernet, which we're at a point of avoiding over-extraction. So by doing shorter pump overs, getting the skin contact right, that doesn't mean shorter time on the skins, it doesn't mean extremely long time on the skins. Every vintage is different, every tank is different. That's very important. Cooler fermentations, less delestage. We don't want to break the cap. If we do a delestage, we fill the tank up on the side so we don't break the cap. We're doing whole berry, we're doing whole bunch even with some of the Sangiovese, submerged caps. We want to be as gentle as possible. So yeah, the Cabernet, the Merlot is treated differently, I guess. But at the end of the day, how can we is about optimizing the extraction. It's not maximizing. We don't want to extract everything as much as we can. We want to keep the finesse. We want our Merlot. You can taste it's Merlot that's grown at 450 meters above sea level. It's not grown on the Tuscan coastline where it's warm and dry. There's an elegance that is throughout all of our wines, and that's what we're trying to maintain. When Mother Nature, she makes that a bit harder sometimes, but that's the goal of the wines. And so yeah, it's the Merlot, the Cabernet, the Sangiovese, definitely. Yeah, the barrels also, the aging is very different. The Merlot and the Cabernet, I think they benefit from spending time in 225 liters, whereas I think the larger is better with the Sangiovese. All of the Sangiovese is going to 500 or even 3,000 or 2,500 liter botte grande, piccole, small botte. But yeah, it's probably the biggest difference, I guess. Yeah.
So with Querciabella, what would be the say over the next 10 years, other than, of course, continue to deal with whatever the effects of climate change are going to be, because
Yes.
we know that's going to continue.
Yes.
But from a whether it's a project standpoint, whether it's a evolution standpoint, what are the next steps for Querciabella?
Wow. So we are in the process of really concentrating and driving on now and continuing with the single village project, the different Uyghurs that we've been working on, and the fact that we have the possibility to do it now and release these wines and write on the front label where the grapes are grown. It's great. So this is a driving force for us, maintaining the quality of our Chianti Classico. If you see on our label, the biggest font on the label, the biggest writing is actually the vintage. So we want to showcase the vintage regardless of the vintage conditions. We need to continue that. We are thinking out the box a little bit in some areas in the Maremma and the Tuscan coastline. We've taken out some of our Merlot vineyards and we are planting some Rhone varieties. We're planting some Mourvèdre, we're planting some Grenache, we're planting more Syrah, trying to kind of look around the corner. It's very hard to see how things are going to go, but just to continue to make wines that are, especially with our wines from the Maremma, drinkability, freshness is very hard when the Merlot is going to 15% alcohol. So by adapting and trying with some cultivars that keep freshness, they're low alcohol, they're still juicy, and for the styles of the wines we're making in the Maremma, we're trying to, that'll help. Winemaking wise, we're just going to keep on, we're fine tuning. We know what's working generally, and then we're doing lots of little changes and just trying to stay ahead of the curve is the biggest thing for us. So.
Do you find that the markets for the Chianti Classico wines versus the Maremma wines is different?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. For Querciabella, I'm giving assistance to our export director over there in Asia, and then also on the side of the world, and it's two very different things. I was in Korea a month ago, and for example, in Korea, our Maremma wines, the people they go crazy for it. They like the Chianti Classico, and the Chianti Classico actually does very well for us. Korea is one of our most important markets in Asia, actually. But the wines from the Maremma, maybe it's an association. There's a taste that they're used to tasting, because maybe the market over there, they've been tasting Cabernets and Merlots and Syrahs for longer. Maybe there's also, they feel safer because they know what Cabernet the word is or what Merlot is, or it's a combination of the two. I don't know. But for example, you do a portfolio tasting in Korea, and everyone comes back to taste the non-Sangiovese wines and come to drink and enjoy it. Whereas there are certain other markets around the world where Sangiovese is the driving force. So yeah, I think there is different. People are different all around the world. Eat different, taste different. So, yeah.
Absolutely. There's a lot of talk in our industry that our industry is not connecting with younger wine drinkers. That younger wine drinkers are not. Connected, resonating with the rest of the wine industry, and that. So let's talk about that first, because I mean, I find it confusing sometimes, because I think a lot of the issues that our industry complains about, our industry is actually created on their own.
Yes.
And by actually trying to segment different generations, they're actually making things worse.
Yes.
So how would you, and when you're out, because you say more and more you're out talking to consumers
Yes.
and in different markets, what do you see in different markets when you're talking to consumers regarding why do you think young people aren't interested? If in fact they aren't interested, I actually think they are interested, but
I think that segmentation starts with the production of the wines. And I think something in the Chianti Classico, what was beautiful if you attended the tasting on Monday, is very young. The new generation is taking over. The daughters and the sons are taking over. They're driving innovation. They're winemakers who have grown up in the village, but they've also now traveling far more. They're going out, they're seeing stuff that I've seen around the world, that there's more to life than just the greve or than rada. There's many different styles of food. So they're staying more relevant, I think, and they're coming back with these new open-minded ideas. And for us, for the Chianti Classico region, it's quite challenging because, I mean, there's many different styles of wine from all around, but I think the Sangiovese, maybe being a lighter style, a medium body style, it's very perfumed, it's very elegant. Our Sangiovese you see on the label is the three chefs. So the Sangiovese is a food wine, is working very well. And I think we are still very fortunate that we have the characteristic inherent in the grape of our region, where people can enjoy our wine with food. So it's all fine and well sitting and tasting a chair together now, but if we were to pair it with food, people get that. And I think that is helping the Chianti Classico region. We also have something that's called an Italian restaurant. So Italian restaurants around the world generally have Italian wines. So Italian producers are very fortunate that they're able to sell their wines also in many different styles of restaurants. But the fact that there exists Italian restaurant is an opportunity. But then you get a bit lazy because you know it's made in Italy and all the rest. So the quality needs to be driving. And for me, I've said quality far too many times in this chat. Making better wine is very important, and in the Chianti Classico, I think we're doing that, and I think the young generation is also driving that, which is fantastic.
Right. Well, I don't think you can say quality enough. So I mean, I think that's a very significant point. I mean, because our industry can market all they want, but if the quality is not there to back it up, the consumer's going to recognize that immediately.
Yeah,
Exactly. I've always been a firm believer that wine and food, I don't say wine and food together because to me wine is food, gets its context from the people, the place, the culture, and the history. And I think Italy is probably a country that exemplifies that maybe better than any other wine producing country in the world. Now that you've been there, and even though growing up with an Italian mother, now that you've been there, has that aspect of it sunk in even more than what you originally thought it was going to?
Exponentially. And then you even travel, I mean, we travel around Italy, but you travel around Tuscany and things change from village to village, and you'll go somewhere and the typical plate is this pasta, and then you go 20 minutes north and it's a different food, and then the typical cheese is this, and you go to that village across the road and they're doing it differently there, or that gentleman over there is doing it differently to that. So all of that coming together, I think you can probably spend your entire life traveling around Italy and you won't try every single wine that there is or every single plate that is made in the regional, the typicity, the seasonality, eating foods of the season, vegetables of the season, very important also. And putting all of that together, I think it's a special place, and that's why I live in Italy. I can do my job anywhere where there's enough sunshine to ripen the grapes, but to be in Italy, it's very special, and it feels like I'm supposed to be. It feels like home to me, so that's why it's our home.
Yeah, grazie.
No, grazie a te. Thank you very much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. So thank you.